What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to be doing another episode of Star Wars Battlefront 2 Mythbusters, this time focusing on a few questions surrounding some of the different types of shields within the game. Now, this was actually suggested by one of my subs, Tyler Klaus, and originally I was planning to focus on just the Flametrooper against all the shields in the game and then move on to a second myth. I'd even pre-made the thumbnail and everything. However, as I started testing it, I realised there were so many different things I could test to do with the shield, so I decided to make a whole episode focused on just the shields instead. As you can see, there were 22 different tests that I did, and in some of these there were multiple things that I tested within each clip, so all up there's probably close to around 30 different tests altogether, and because of that I'm going to go ahead and fly through them as quick as I can so that the video doesn't drag on for too long. So starting off with the Flametrooper, since that's where the idea did originate from, and the first shield I tested was the Specialist Personal Shield. Now keep in mind, I don't show any tests in here of Iden's Droid Shield, and the reason for that is because when I tested them all the results were exactly the same as the Specialist Shield, so it pretty much would have been a waste of time to show it again with Iden instead. So any results that do come from the Specialist Shield are exactly the same as Iden's, the only difference being that her shield has a lot more base HP. So yeah, starting off with the Specialist Shield, and just as I actually expected, the Flametrooper wasn't affected at all by the shield. It doesn't even give reduced damage or anything, it pretty much just acts like the shield isn't there at all. Moving on to the Heavy's Combat Shield, and the result for this was actually exactly the same. I also tested it without the shield activated to see whether it at least gave any damage reduction at all, and as you can see, the time to kill is exactly the same with and without the combat shield activated. This was actually one of the last tests that I did with the Heavy's Combat Shield, as after a few tests I realised that although it will block blaster bolts from the front, nothing else in the game can actually be stopped by this shield, so I thought it was smarter to just leave the rest out of the video. I then moved on to the Officer's Squad Shield, and again this had absolutely no effect on the Flametrooper whatsoever. In actual fact, you can see that the flamethrower completely destroyed the shield from full health, and it actually took it down before the officer himself even died, so this shows just how useful the flamethrower can be against a group of enemies hiding inside a squad shield. For good measure, I also decided to test Leia's shield as well, just in case there were any differences, but as you can see, her shield is exactly the same as the regular squad shield, just with a lot more base HP, so from here on out I only tested against the regular squad shield to save a little more time as well. Now, once I had done all of the Flametrooper tests, this got me thinking about the Acid Launcher, and so I decided to test the same shields, but this time using the Assault Class Acid Launcher instead of the Flamethrower. With every single shield, the results were exactly the same as the Flamethrower, with the only difference being that the little projectile can't actually pass through the shield, however the acid that comes from it will still cause damage through the shield. Now, with Leia and the officer's shields, technically speaking, they kind of do protect you from the acid launcher, seeing as the little grenade can't actually get inside of the shield, and so if you do stand at the back half of the shield, there's no way for it to be close enough that you can take damage from it. With that being said, it still does technically cause damage through the shield, so although it does still protect you from the acid a lot more than the other shields do, it can still cause damage if you are close enough to the grenade itself. I also just quickly tested it with the Dioxis grenade as well, just to make sure that they acted the same, and as you can see, the result was exactly the same as the regular acid launcher. Now, the next thing that I tested was the regular thermal detonator, and what you're about to see is really not what I expected when I went to test this myth. The first couple of throws were down towards the feet, as you can see, and it looks like the grenade actually went inside of the shield, pretty much breaking through the barrier, which obviously allowed it to deal a small amount of damage. To make sure it actually just worked in general, I threw it at the middle of the shield, and as you can see, it did bounce off just as it should, and it didn't cause any damage to the enemy, so it almost seems as though the shield does work. However, the bottom of the shield is pretty much non-existent. Now, after a few more throws, I realised that just to the side of the character is another spot where the grenade can actually pass through, and this really surprised me to say the least. It's almost as though the shield works exactly as it should, however, there are just a few random spots where it seems to be completely non-existent. This definitely seems to be a bug, and so even though the shield does work the exact same as the other shields in the game, there is always a chance it can just bug out like you've just seen, so make sure to keep that in mind when you are using the Specialist Personal Shield. Now, moving on from that, I decided to go back and test Bosk's micro grenades, and just as it should be, the officer's shield completely deflects anything from getting inside the actual shield. I then brought the officer close to the edge to see if the splash damage did actually go through the shield similar to the Dioxis grenade. However, luckily it worked exactly as it should, deflecting all of the splash damage. Now, on the other hand, I also tested his proximity mines, and these can actually pass through the shield and blow up inside. So if you are inside the shield, you're not 100% safe from Bosk at all. The next thing I tested was Boba's rocket barrage, and again the shield did absorb all of the damage as it should, and it actually took a lot more damage to get destroyed than I originally thought it would. It took 3 full barrages with the extra rockets card equipped for the shield to actually get destroyed, so the shield has actually turned out to be super useful against Boba, which is definitely a very handy tip to know. I then tested his concussion rocket, and although it did explode on impact with the shield, it does actually still blur your vision, although let's be honest, that really doesn't affect you anyway, so this one isn't really that big of a deal. The next thing I tested was the Jump Trooper's rocket launcher, and again this is the exact same as the rest of the explosives. The shield completely absorbed the explosion, and it did also stop any splash damage as well, seeing as the officer was so close to the edge of the shield. Now, the next thing that I tested was Vader's saber throw, and to be honest, I really wasn't sure what the result would be, but as you can see, the shield does actually stop his saber throw, which I'm not going to lie, that actually really did surprise me. I made sure to test it in a few different spots in case we had the same situation as the bubble shield earlier on, but as you can see, no matter where I threw it, it did actually stop the saber completely. I did the same test on Maul's saber throw as well, and again it did result in the exact same thing as Vader's saber, pretty much just bouncing straight off the shield and back into his hand. With that being said, I did also test both of their force choke abilities, and the shield actually didn't do a thing to protect the officer, so although it is helpful that it can stop the saber throw, you're still not safe from these guys by any means. I then tested Iden's alternate fire mode, and just the same as the regular explosives, this did nothing to damage the officer inside the shield. I did however test the stun droid as well, and the shield didn't stop this bad boy from getting inside the shield and stunning the officer. So again, you're by no means safe from Iden by being inside the shield. Now, the next thing I tested was all of Palpatine's abilities and regular attacks, and I'm sure most people probably know this anyway, but I just thought I'd throw it in there anyway, seeing as I guess that is the whole point of the video, to test what can and can't pass through the shield. To put it simply, none of the shields in the game do anything at all to stop Palpatine. His regular attacks and every single ability will pass through the shield, so if you do happen to see a Palpatine, then make sure to not throw down the shield, because all that's going to do is make it a whole lot worse. Next, I tested Han's Detonator charge, and exactly as I'm sure we all assumed, this worked the exact same as every other explosive. As you can see, it bounces off the shield and then the explosion just gets completely absorbed by the shield as well. So overall, the shield does completely negate the effects of the Detonator charge. Now, moving on to the last test for the video, and this one was Lando's Disabler ability. Just like the Detonator charge, this one does bounce off the shield as well, however it can still stun you through the shield, similar to Iden's stun droid. Due to the radius of the stun, there's actually no place inside the shield where you can be safe if the Disabler is right next to the edge of the shield, so although it does bounce off the shield, technically it does nothing to protect you at all. So to summarise the whole video, rather than going through the whole list and add an extra minute or two to the video, I'll just show it on screen here for you guys, so feel free to pause it and take a look if you are after a brief summary of all these results. Now, as I always say in these videos, just keep in mind that arcade can often be a little different than multiplayer, so even though I'm sure most, if not all of this stuff is correct, just keep in mind that some of it may actually be slightly different in a multiplayer setting. So that is going to be it for this episode of Battlefront 2 Mythbusters, guys. As you can see, we had a few unexpected results, and overall I think it's fair to say I actually learned a fair bit from making this episode, so hopefully you guys learned a few things as well. If you did enjoy the video, make sure to drop a like down below to help support the channel, and like I always say, if you do have any myths you'd like me to test, then make sure to let me know down in the comments section. If you are new to the channel, then feel free to subscribe and make sure to turn on your notifications so you don't miss out on any more Battlefront 2 guides or live streams. Thank you all so much for watching. You guys have a great day, and I'll catch you all in the next one.